Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, our weekly look at stories around northern Michigan that are making headlines with those journalists that are covering northern Michigan. And to my left, Sara Simnitch from 9 and 10 News. Sara, welcome back.
Good morning.
And Jeremy McBain from the Petoskey News Review. Jeremy, thank you for coming in. Good to see you again.
you.
Let's start off talking about the weather. It's been a busy winter, to say the least. We sat at this table a couple weeks ago and talked a lot about it, but gosh, another few snow days this week. Jeremy, what's going on up north? How are folks dealing with the snow?
It's snowing a lot. It won't stop. They're dealing with snow like normal North Michigan residents. They're just going to take it in stride and slow down a little bit in the roads. And it's northern Michigan. It's snow.
I saw. I don't remember the city now, but somewhere up in the UP, they got 33 inches. Tuesday into Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, just yesterday, Arizona got snow.
Yeah, and a hailstorm. I saw.
Yeah,
that
I
too,
saw on Facebook that there are always postings some people I know in Arizona of snow to them, and which would be frost.
Which would be rain. Yeah, exactly.
They were going nuts about it, and of course I had to tell them.
Yeah, you're not used to
snow. I got a few feet.
What have you seen, heard, just in terms of, I guess, the conversation, and are we talking road commissions, budgets, school days? We're at the point now, I think, where districts all over are saying, yeah, we're there. We got to make up days now in June.
I keep hearing a lot about snow days. People are wondering, have we reached the limit now? When we checked on this about a week ago, the schools in Charlotte hadn't reached the limit yet. They might have now, because they just had those two snow days. If they're either right at the limit or they've reached it now.
What I'd want to know too is, because you have so many communities up in your area that are kind of in that traditional snow belt. Traverse City, for example, builds in 6 days to their calendar. Does Charlevoix do the same, or because they're in the snow belt, maybe they build in a couple extra every year? Or?
Well, excuse me, all the schools get a certain amount of days for snow days. So they're kind of built in the calendar already. No matter what school district you're in. Right. And I believe it's 6. I believe is the correct number.
I think so. Yeah. As of Monday, Kingsley was their last one. Was Monday, and then I believe they may have canceled Tuesday. So they are over, I would say, but I'm not positive. Yeah. I don't know if they canceled Tuesday or not. So.
Well, I talked to John Hoover in East Jordan, superintendent there. Tuesday, Wednesday?
Monday they didn't have school. So Tuesday, I believe, or something like that. He said we're up to our last one. Yeah, Monday was President's Day, so they're right there.
Tuesday, Wednesday. East Jordan schools, and John Hoover was telling me they've got a staff development day in March that was going to be a day off of school anyway. So now they've changed that. They're going to make that a school day, just to try to alleviate some of that burden in June when it comes down to it. They're just, I think, and TCAP's told us the same thing, that they're just trying to think of other ways to do this without putting us into the middle of June.
As a parent, though, seeing this is mid-February, we still have a lot of winter left in northern Michigan. I would plan on the school year being a little bit longer this year. I would just plan on it. It's almost inevitable.
Well, look at March last year. That huge storm we got, 17 some inches at the beginning of March, and I mean March is still winter sort of, but it's like we weren't expecting that after so it's never, you can never expect when this huge storm's going to hit.
Then 2 days later it was 70, 80 degrees out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we had another 2-3 snow days yet this year.
Oh yeah, easily.
So I think, and I saw some comment, and I think it was Traverse City, that they haven't broken their 6 days in 15 years or something. So we're on 8 now. I mean, we've got to be at a record for most districts up here, I would think. The other interesting comment from East Jordan, which I don't think I've ever heard a superintendent say to me in all the years of covering snow days, he said, we don't want our teen drivers driving to school in this.
That's a great point.
We don't want
It's not just about buses.
Yeah, this is our for a lot of kids, it's their first winter on the roads. So that was another factor for them in canceling school the other day. I don't want all the 16-year-olds trying to get on these roads. And I just thought that was interesting, something I'd never really considered.
I noticed a lot too about the differences from I'm being from downstate, the Flint area, and down there, you know, we don't really cancel school that often. I mean, even when we do get a fair amount of snow, even 3 hours south, but we don't get, you know, we don't have many snow days. And I think the difference when I came up here was that it was, you know, I was like, oh, they're never going to call school because it's northern Michigan. And I guess the reason it is, the underlying reason is because it's all back roads. Pretty much northern Michigan for the most part is back roads. And that is likely why they do it. But my brother-in-law is from North Dakota. And he said, you know, we didn't cancel school. When he moved here and said, you know, what is a snow day? You know, it was like we had to be snowed in up to the roof before we didn't go to school, you know. And so it's just different to see that, you know, how people think and, you know, and that's what I thought northern Michigan was going to be like when I moved up here 2 years ago, that, you know, they're never going to have snow days, you know.
I think my one remaining question in all of this, and it just seems like there's been no clear answer on it, is, you know, why do some districts do things like 2-hour delays or half days, and some districts just don't? TCAPS, for example, says, you know, we just don't do 2-hour delays. But we had a couple instances in the past couple of weeks where it was a rainy start to the morning, or it was icy, and things cleared out by 7 o'clock, or things cleared out by 9 o'clock. And I heard from parents, why are we having a snow day today? You know, and I'm a, you know, parent too. And there were a couple of instances when I wondered, why are we wasting a snow day on this? And I understand the road conditions are different at 5 than they are at 7, 8, 9 in the morning, but there just seems to be a different standard for different schools. And I don't know if you have any situations up there like that.
We do have situations like that in Charlotte and Amite counties, and it's a, you know, you're making a human judgment. Each one of these superintendents and these and their bus transportation supervisors, they're the ones that really make the call. They go out in the morning, very early in the morning, hitting the roads, talking to the Michigan State Police and the sheriff's departments to find out what the road conditions are. Even with all that information, it still comes down to, you know, human decision. And sometimes humans get it wrong, sometimes they get it right. And as a parent, I would rather them err on the side of caution.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, weathermen, they don't get it right all the time. Yeah. Just like the superintendent, you know, if he decides to call school and the roads that morning were icy and they turned into just slush later on the day, it's tough to be able to tell that's going to happen.
Well, a lot of times a 2-hour delay turns into a full cancellation, you know, and other times it's like, you know, vice versa. You know, well, we should have just had a 2-hour delay, you know. So I think that it...
Well, and even more so, I guess, even more than the question about that decision, for me, it's a question of what is the policy? As you know, why do we have a policy where we refuse to do 2-hour delays, or why do we refuse to dismiss early, or whatever the case may be? Because the conditions seem to change so frequently, it would seem to me that districts may want to have 5 or 6 different choices of how they do things.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's superintendent preference, and a lot of things that may have to do with the staff. You know what I mean? If parents leave for work and they've already, you know, gotten arrangements for their kids, and then, oh, well, we got to come back from work now in 2 hours and take them, you know, or whatever, or be there at the bus stop with them. You know, maybe it's a convenience preference. I am not really sure, but
Can't
that's
please
a great point. What I hadn't thought of is, with a 2-hour delay, you've already made your arrangements. Thank you, and then all of a sudden you got to change them again. But as far as different districts having different policies, well,
that's true of a lot of things. That is true of a lot of things. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, talk a weather-related story, Sarah, that you and I both covered this week in Grand Traverse County, an accident on Sunday that claimed a couple of lives, a tragedy involving snow-covered roads in Kingsley.
Yeah, it was just it was a dad and his 2 daughters in the car, and David, Krista, and Noelle Pipley, and they were traveling on Sparling Road, and it intersects with Summit City, and the speed limit there is both ways 55, and there was a plow truck coming, and Michigan State Police say that David failed to yield or failed to stop at the stop sign. Why, we obviously don't know, but and then the plow truck obviously couldn't, saw him but couldn't stop, and ended up, claiming their lives, Krista and David. And Monday we went to the school, and a lot of Krista's classmates were there. She was involved in 3 or 4 sports. She was a percussionist in the band. She was really well liked in her community, and her sister was treated and released, so she's fine, or expected to be. But yeah, certainly a tragedy. And the Kingsley community, I mean, being a small town, was really, really tore up. And today they're dismissing school at 11:30 for the memorial services. And it's a sad thing to see, and you wonder, could it have been prevented? And after that accident, we got several news tips. We received several tips about that intersection being really dangerous. And so we kind of went out there, and one of the families that lives along Summit City Road, or Sparling Road, excuse me, was their cousin that we talked to had been killed in 2010 in a similar accident, except he was in the back seat. And the driver of the car he was riding in didn't stop. And we actually covered that at 9 and 10 as well. And so I was kind of looking in the archives to see what the circumstances were there. And he died on his way to the hospital. And there's a couple crosses at that intersection now. And so we went and talked to this family. And then we also talked to Michigan State Police. And Sergeant Hilborn is a crash scene investigator. And he said, he pulled the stats for us he said it's difficult to narrow down crash statistics from a particular intersection. He said there's a website that we have access to that can do that. So it took him a while, and we did that. And according to him, in his stats, there's only been about 4 or 5 accidents at that intersection, and 2 of them being fatal, both of them being people that have failed to stop. But it does sit at the base of 2 hills. And so if there's a car coming over that hill and doesn't know that there's a cross street, an intersection there, and that person even rolls a stop or doesn't see them, and it's easy not to see them. There's tall trees there. I mean, it is a little tough to navigate. So we covered that and kind of just got the word out there. I think viewers wanted to know, about that intersection. We've gotten so many tips, we wanted to address it.
What interested me about your first story on Monday was, at the school, and you talked with a couple of gentlemen, I think, who were friends of David. And it's hard sometimes, and you've probably experienced this too, just reaching out to friends of students, especially other people who have been killed in accidents like that. Kind of making that judgment of whether, I guess, A, you approach them, B, whether they're willing to talk, C, whether you're going to come across as insensitive.
Yeah.
But I got the sense from that interview, number one, because they both sat down with you, but just number 2, with what they said, that this was a case where they wanted to talk about these people. They wanted to talk about David. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, I guess the media gets a bad rap for being insensitive, but in a lot of ways, people want to have that conversation, and it's cathartic, and it helps them to talk about.
Well, it's never, even after, I've been here 2 years, and I'm by no means a pro, but I don't think it's something you ever get good at. It's not easy. It's not easy for me. It's not easy for my photojournalist. You don't want to approach them. It's tough, and you just have to approach them with kindness and say, if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, and a lot of times it is, and it's sharing their memory. It's sharing what they remember about that person. And for him, there were a couple sound bites that he gave me that David's friend that really hit home, or touched me. And it was, one of them was, he was a loving person. He was funny, and when he saw you, he always wanted to give you a hug. And I was never one for hugs, but I wish I would have now. And that was really one of those, wow, And so it is. Sometimes people want to share those stories, and, then sometimes they get choked up, and then they feel uncomfortable and think, I don't want to do this anymore, And then sometimes they just keep going and they work through it, but it's a tough thing to have to do that with somebody that knows, someone that's passed.
What you said was very correct in that it's not something that anybody gets really good at, but it is something that a reporter can be really bad at.
Absolutely.
And the way that a reporter can approach a person that's going through that, and I've seen some reporters in the past who have just made me so angry sorry, television reporters in particular. Your station in the past, I haven't seen it in years. Out front of your station, there was a reporter that you had at one time that was just screaming at television at what the reporter had done. You don't go and shove a camera in somebody's face and say the most horrible question, how are you feeling? Well, you idiot. How do you think I'm feeling?
How do you think I'm feeling, yeah. Same goes for houses that catch on fire. People that have lost their home. That's never easy either, to go up and say, well, do you want to talk to us about it? Well, not really. You know, I mean, I just lost everything I own. So, you know.
With my reporters, what I tell them to do is it's one of the worst things that we have to do as reporters is talk to people who are going through something like that, and it's hard for the reporter too. I mean, because I've had reporters who they'll do these interviews and they'll come back to the office and just they need some time to themselves. What I was telling them is look, just say to them, if you want to talk, here's my card. And you know, we want to tell, especially if somebody's died, we say we want to tell their story and this of who they were, rather than just a story about an accident or a death. I want to be able to say who they were,
to know how they impacted the community.
Yes, and you give them life in the story rather than just a statistic.
Get it for a piece of news.
Yeah. So what I tell my reporters, just be very gentle, give them a card, don't push them on it. If they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to talk to you. That's fine. You know, majority of the time people do want to talk because it is a little cathartic to them, and they would rather tell their friend or family member's story too, and I would rather that as well, because I'd rather have a story telling how great a person was rather than just this is how they died.
Yeah, well then, at the same time too, it's with us in television, it's a lot of times what Jeremy and I have done, and we still do, as typically our routine is that like we won't even show the camera. You know, I don't want it anywhere around when I'm talking to this person. You know, this is just me and you having a conversation, and if you decide that you want to talk to us, then Jeremy can set up the camera. We'll go somewhere private, you know, nobody's listening to you or us talk, or, you know, and I think that's it. And a lot of times in the past, we've been thanked for that. One of the times was at, kind of odd, but at Shooter's Gun Range when they had all those handguns stolen. And we walked in there to the owner and we said, you know, we heard about this, wondering if you maybe want to chat with us about it, you know, and he's like, well, thank you. He's like, you know, I really respect that you didn't bring a camera in here right off the bat, and, you know, and so that's great. It's good to hear things like that, and I think it's just a level of respect, you know. I wouldn't want a camera shoved in my face. I'm not going to do that without your consent. You know. Yeah,
that's a good point. And you know, as a one-man band for most of my TV career, I did the same thing where I would just leave the camera in the car and go talk to the people first. And there were times, I think, when, you know, I would spend 20 minutes with somebody, and at the end of that, they didn't want to talk.
Right.
All right.
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
Yep.
You know,
that's just an excellent way of doing it. I think that is one of the greatest things about Northern Michigan journalism, is that we have a lot of journalists who think this way of, you know, I'm not gonna force myself on, force an interview on this person. I'm gonna be a little gentle with them. Leaving the camera in the car, it's fantastic. And in my career, it's a unique trait to Northern Michigan, because a lot of stations downstate, bigger stations and bigger newspapers, they won't do stuff like that.
There's more pressure. Yeah. Well, and even, you know, talking, I think the biggest thing too is saying that, you know, anything I ask you, if you don't want to answer it, don't answer it. You know, like, don't feel pressured to answer anything. And a lot of times that will open people up too, to, well, I don't have to answer this, but here's how I would answer it. Or, you know what I mean?
And I think one of the hurdles we try to get over, in at least that I had tried to get over with folks, is this is not live.
Yep.
You know, they think
you
that
can start over as many times as you
everything
want.
they say will be on TV for 10 continuous minutes, and you know that's not the case. But I think you're right. I think this smaller market makes it easier. I've always kind of been of the mindset that no story is worth it, is that important. That if someone doesn't want to talk about it, or if it's that uncomfortable or sensitive, that
there was when the Sergeant Hansen or Sergeant Schwartz which one, we covered 2 deaths in the military locally, and the one we talked to his brother-in-law, and when his brother-in-law was talking, he was crying, and I started crying. I mean, I was a wreck. I couldn't even, and so then at the end, we like hugged each other, because I thought, this is so awesome. This is one of the awesome things about Northern Michigan, is that, and so then he saw that, like, I was crying and knew, like, okay, she's a real person. She has real emotions. She's not here just to get a news story, or, and there are stories, like you said, that sometimes you just need some time, and you're like, I can't, I can't do this, or this is really hard for me, or,
As an editor, when I have reporters will come back to the office, from an interview like that, and tell me they just weren't comfortable at this time talking, I'm not going to push the issue,
right.
because I know that. I just know how it is. I know you got to give these folks time,
right?
Because here's the big difference between Northern Michigan and the bigger markets, especially in Southern Michigan, is we see these people outside of work all the time. You see them in the grocery stores and the restaurants.
They know who
your
you
kids
are.
go to school.
You have
with
to
them.
see them again, yeah.
You are community members with them, and you're not. They're not. Nobody is this face or nameless person in a crowd. Everybody knows you.
Yeah.
And you know everybody.
Yeah.
There was an accident, it's got to be 7-8 years ago now, that I covered, and it involved the death of a very young child. And I had a newborn son, relatively newborn son too, and for me that was the story that stands out for me that I just couldn't deal with. Like that, it just hit too close to home. I got there, and this was a child relatively close in age to my own, and it was just tough.
Well, we were talking the other day with Michigan State Police about how our jobs are similar, because I said, well, you go to a crash scene and you investigate these crashes, and sometimes and he was like, well, yeah, but you can't personalize it. And then we were paralleling, doing a parallel with our jobs about how, there's a lot of things I covered. My mom will even be like, how do you cover that? Like these criminal sexual conduct cases with these 4- and 5-year-old kids, and it's like, how do you sleep at night? Well, you just can't think about it like, like Jeremy always would tell me, my photojournalist, it's think of it as a movie, or it's it's not, you can't, if you do that, you'll go crazy, I think. You know what I mean? It's just covering something, and you have to relate to the story to a certain sense, but you can't really let your emotions take over too much. So
it is interesting what you said about the interview with the brother. So people, like you said, don't necessarily think that we're human sometimes, or make that human connection. I remember covering a apartment fire, I think, up in, maybe it was in Gaylord, several years ago, and lots of people were displaced. They were out of a home, and one of the many women I talked to in the shelter, they had put 25 people in a church. She cried during the interview, and at the end of the interview, she hugged me, and it was just, it was breaking down that wall of, you're the person, you're the robot journalist, or whatever the circumstance was, and we are, real people, and we can relate, and we can also be respectful of your circumstance and your situation, and not need to push it. Well, let's take a break on the briefing room here. We're going to come back in closing minutes. We'll talk about a couple of other stories, but I think good opportunity for us to take a moment here. We'll be right back on the briefing room.
What is Up North TV?
It's TV that you do.
You pick the topic.
You write the script. You run the camera.
You edit the video.
It's your vision.
Your perspective.
Your story.
Commercial free.
Free speech.
What is Up North TV?
It's me.
It's you.
It's all of us.
View us on Analog 97.
Cable digital too.
Digital 992.
UpNorthMedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich, joined by Sara Simnitch from 9 and 10 News and Jeremy McBain from the Petoskey News Review. We went a little long in that last segment, so we've just got a couple of moments here before we close out this week. But Jeremy, I know there's been a lot of talk about a wolf hunt in Michigan. That's kind of been a hot button issue, especially for northern Michigan, obviously the area that it affects the most. Tell me what you're hearing and what the general consensus is up north.
Well, we're hearing a lot of jokes about the dog man.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It's a very divisive issue. It is one of those where if you are for it, you were very much for it. If you were against it, you were very much against it. So we heard a lot of passionate responses on both sides. The Humane Society, I believe, has filed a lawsuit. There's a petition going around to try and remove it, remove the idea of a hunt. And I know that there's a work group, I believe it's a DNR work group, one official work group that is meeting, I believe this week or next week, to discuss some of the outlines of how a hunt would take place, where a hunt would. Now, the one thing I do think should be stressed is that it's not a done deal there's going to be a hunt. They're still trying to determine should they have a hunt, should they not have a hunt, if they do have a hunt, how much of a hunt, should the hunt be located to just one area. These are all questions that haven't really been answered. The only thing that we know for sure is that one is that wolves have been delisted as an endangered species in Michigan, so they can be listed as a game species, or they are a game species now. And two, that the state government has told the DNR, we want you to look into, we're giving you permission to look into the feasibility of having a hunt.
It's the Natural Resources Commission.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Which I think, and a lot of people took that announcement as the official word that all of a sudden we are having a wolf hunt, but that's, I mean, we're still going through the steps in the process.
Yeah, I mean, but all the steps, I mean, it's all the indications that they're pointing at having a hunt, but it's not official. So we can't say that there's going to be a hunt. It looks that way, but the size of it, where it's going to be at, it's all that's up in the air.
I was going to say, isn't it still, I mean, it's feasible that this could be, like the conversations we heard about moose hunts. I mean, there could be a limit on, 10 wolves and that's it for the year. I mean, any range of possibilities?
Yeah, it could. I mean, it could be any range of possibilities. The thing that really concerns me right now is that I'm not really seeing much discussion about actual science behind it. What's the science? What does the science show would be a feasible number of wolves in the state of Michigan? What are wolves an actual danger? What do the actual science and statistics and surveys show for depredation of deer, for a death of livestock, for death of pets, for attacks on human beings?
It's all an emotional argument.
It's all emotional. It's all anecdotal. People have their little stories about what their neighbor did, what their neighbor saw. It's all very emotional, very anecdotal on both sides of the issue. Give me the science here. Yeah. And I do know there have been scientific studies on depredation specifically with wolves, and this came out about a year ago, and where they looked at what was the major killer of fawns in the Upper Peninsula, and they had and I'm just vaguely remember the study off the top of my head. I know wolves were not the number one predator of fawns. It was coyotes and cars. Wolves they weren't really even up there. So I want to see more studies like that. I want to see more hard facts that I can present to readers rather than these emotional arguments on both sides saying, gotcha. Wolves are a spiritual animal and we need to protect them and they're beautiful and they belong in the woods and they shouldn't be killed. Or the other side of they're vicious predators that they killed my neighbor's dog and I killed my neighbor's cows, and I'm afraid for my children being outside and they're coming into town. All these anecdotal stuff.
Gotcha.
Give me solid facts here.
We'll watch as that one develops. I guess let's end real briefly on a related wildlife note. Do you recall the state record muskie that was caught last fall in Antrim County? Did you hear this news yesterday? The state record caught in, was it Lake Bellaire?
Yes, it was Lake Bellaire.
Is now a world record. They've determined, and I thought this was great, the International Committee on Muskellunge Measurements, or it's just there's an official committee now which has declared it at 58 pounds and 58 inches and 29-inch girth is the officially world record now.
The picture was the three people holding it up, and all I know is I'm not swimming in Lake Bellaire.
Well, you can now.
It's
Now
gone.
you can.
Well,
It's
his brother might be upset.
there you go. Big Brother is out there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week on the Briefing Room. Thanks to Sara Simnitch and Jeremy McBain for joining us as well. If you tuned in late, you can always watch a rebroadcast or check out our blog page, briefingroom.org. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio. Thanks for watching.